My name is Craig Thomas. I am one of the panelists for tonight's discussion. I'm also going to serve as a co-host to kind of go over some ground rules and run the presentation. So what we have for you tonight is 5 panelists, different industrial backgrounds, different educational backgrounds. And we're going to go through a brief kind of meet and greet where we'll present about ourselves, and we'll open up the floor to questions to the group and then questions to individuals if we see fit. So right now, I'm going to share my screen and bring up a presentation. So let's see here. So before I talk too long, can someone confirm they can see my screen and hear me talking?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. I forgot you can't see us.
I can't see anything but a little light on my laptop and the presentation itself. So again, thanks for joining us. Again, this is just a virtual meet and greet put on by the First Two Network. We're part of the Industry Advisory Board. And again, this is all for the students joining us tonight. So the overview is quite simple. We're allowing STEM students to learn about potential career paths and ask specific questions. That is our one and only goal for tonight, is to share information to people that may not have made up their mind yet about a career path or just curious about other career paths out there in the STEM world. A couple of ground rules. Again, I mentioned each panelist is going to give a short background on his or herself. Attendees can ask questions either by voice or to the chat box on the side. I know when you get into a large call like this, sometimes the audio back and forth isn't the best. We'll have breakout rooms after the general session if you have specific questions for a certain panelist. And again, this session is being recorded, so please take note of that as we go. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Adam Smith. He's the industrial co-chair of this group, and he's going to be our panelist number 1 in tonight's session.
Just quickly, how much time should I spend on this, Craig?
I think up to 5 minutes would be sufficient.
Right, okay, no problem. So Erica was saying that she missed that we didn't have music, so I thought maybe we could all do our own, like a walk-up song or something, but or not. But so my name's Adam Smith. As Craig mentioned, this is part of what we call the Industry Advisory Board, and Craig and I are co-hosts for that, and we're really excited to be here and see all the names of students that joined us today. But I went to, Adam Smith. I have a BS in chemistry, and I went to Fairmont State University. And when I finished there, I went to graduate school at the University of Virginia and stayed in chemistry. And then went to the Air Force Research Lab in Dayton, Ohio, to do some more work there. Right now, and since 2007, I guess it is, I've been a research chemist for a company that formerly was DuPont, and then we spun off the business that I was in, the Teflon business, and to form a new company called Chemours. And that's actually located in Parkersburg, West Virginia. I want to say that I'm a first-generation college student, by the way. And you can see there, I went to Virginia and Ohio for schooling, but I've lived in West Virginia all of my life. I was also a lab technician and an adjunct chemistry professor, a couple other roles there. But the pictures I have on the right, the top one is a photo, and it's an older photo. A lot of these people have retired or moved on, but this is what we would call a group. So it's the research group at some point in time. And I just put titles by each person. And so you think about what can you do with a STEM degree? Well, there's lots of different things here, right? So you have managers, you have tech, what we would call a lab tech, a PI is a principal investigator. You've got a chemist, you've got a chemical engineer, and so a visiting scientist. So those are that's just a snapshot of a few of the things that a few of the roles, let's say, that I interact with on a daily basis. And then the bottom right is a group picture, and you can see Erica. She's one of our co-hosts today, Erica Harvey, but she's a professor at Fairmont State, and she brought along 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 students, some college students, and then others were first year college students that were participating in a on-site experience at Chemours. That was just a couple of years ago. So anyway, I'll turn it over to our second panelist, and I forget who that is, but as soon as Craig changes the slide. So Tia, let's hear about you.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for sharing your information, Adam. I am Tia Bradley, and I work at Intuit. I've been there for, it'll be 16 years in October. So I am the non-STEM person on the panel, but I've worked at a technology company my entire career. My current role is staff program manager in talent acquisition. So I oversee the assessment process within our hiring, which includes a lot of our technology roles. That's the majority of the roles that we hire for at Intuit. And then I also am on the racial equity advancement leadership team. So this is a CEO sponsored team that works on ensuring that we have equitable and diverse processes within the company. Previously, I was the African Ancestry Network site chair. So that's one of our 12 employee resource groups at Intuit, supporting various communities across the organization. And then I also was a partner experience delivery leader, so handling the relationship between Intuit and the vendors we use for outsourcing. So when I first started at Intuit, I was actually a seasonal customer service agent within our tax organization, and was eventually hired full-time and made my way through the company to eventually getting the role that I have today. So within my role, I work a lot with our folks that are in like software engineer positions and data analysts, tax analysts, so across the company. And we do get to do a lot of fun activities. The picture I chose was actually back when the world was a little bit more open. I went to Afrotech in Oakland, and that is a conference geared towards African Americans within technology. So they had over 10,000 people attend that event. And right now, Intuit is a diamond sponsor at the one that's upcoming in November. But really excited to be here and connect with you all. We have plenty of internship opportunities at Intuit. So any questions you have around what that process looks like or what you can do to prepare, I can definitely help with answering, because I love supporting folks and as they're developing their careers. And super excited that you all are spending your time on a Friday evening to learn more of what you can do for your career. I can tell you, I probably wasn't doing that when I was your age. So really appreciate you spending the time with us today. And I'll go ahead and pass it to the next person.
Everyone, I'm Nikki Zafris. I have been in the science, technology, engineering kind of role for the past 11 years. I do have a Bachelor of Science in Engineering in Chemical Engineering from the University of Pittsburgh, as well as a certificate in Nuclear Engineering from Pitt. When I attended school there, they didn't have a full-blown minor program yet to cover off that sort of nuclear engineering bubble. So they gave you a certificate instead. So I know some people wonder what that actually means. Prior to actually getting my engineering degree though, I started school at the George Washington University in Washington, DC as a chemistry major. I really wanted to go into forensic chemistry and work on all the cool CSI stuff. And then about halfway through my sophomore year, I did a big switch in paths and I transferred majors, I transferred schools. So keep in mind that what you might pick right now doesn't have to be forever. I also started my career in the nuclear industry. So right now I work in oil and gas. I work for a natural gas company called Equitrans Midstream. If anybody's heard of EQT, We used to be associated with them. We split off onto our own company about 3 years ago, and I work as a coating and corrosion engineer, as well as a hydraulic modeling engineer. So I'm very chemical engineering heavy right now. Before I went to Equitrans, I was very nuclear engineering heavy. So I did nuclear core designs for Westinghouse, so dealt with nuclear power plants, dealt with the licensing of nuclear power plants. I've done some pipeline design work for my company, so more on the mechanical side as opposed to the chemical side. And even before I left college, I had an internship at Mine Safety Appliances, which is a company that's actually used a lot by the oil and gas industry as well as others to carry combustible gas sensors. So if you're working on an environment where there might be an explosive gas or a potentially harmful gas, a lot of times they will have you carry monitoring devices that will activate if the levels are too high, too low, et cetera. And I was actually working in the lab as an intern to test to make sure that all of those sensors would fire correctly and react correctly, that we weren't going to run into issues sending them to market. So my background is actually chemical engineering, but I've done a whole lot of stuff out there, which is kind of what's nice about having an engineering degree, is that you do have a little bit of flexibility in the path you might end up ultimately taking. This picture of me is actually my caller ID, and everybody thinks it's something related to COVID. I promise it's not. This was taken 3 years ago before COVID was even a thing. Part of my job, I get to go to different facilities and do some coating inspection work to make sure that coating is being applied properly to the right levels, under the right conditions, things like that. But a lot of the coating is sprayed on. So if you've ever seen like a paint sprayer, it's a similar concept. And since it is a spray application, it'll get everywhere. So when you're in these sort of spray applications, they do tend to get you all suited up like this. And I thought it was cool because I'd never got to do anything like that before. And now everybody just thinks that I'm, somebody who related to biohazards and COVID, but not the case. This is one of the fun parts of my job, is getting to go out and see and do some hands-on stuff as well. And with that, I will pass it on to panelist number 4.
Guys, this is Cindy Argabright. I don't have a picture that I've added, but I have a BS in chemistry from Fairmont State. I am also a first-gen college student, born and raised in West Virginia, work in West Virginia. I have 20 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry. I've also worked in the college chemistry lab setting as a lab manager. And I've held various roles along my career, chemist, quality assurance manager, quality control manager, and currently as a senior quality specialist. So in my current role, I provide scientific support and assistance for consumer complaints with respect to potency and purity and FDA compliance. And just to kind of give you a really generalized idea of how certain things you learn in school, in the classroom, are actually applicable to the real world, I use the scientific method every day of my life. So while working in this role, I will take on the observation of the questions reported. I'll research that topic. I'll form my hypothesis. I'll consult with subject matter experts if it's outside of my area of expertise. And then that allows me to kind of test and prove my theories. And then I'll analyze my data to ensure it's complete and accurate. And then I report my findings in a scientific document. So that's pretty much what I do in a nutshell. And I'm going to pass it on to the next person.
Okay. So I'm panelist number 5. Again, my name is Craig Thomas. I'm also born and raised in West Virginia, a rural part of West Virginia, Wetzel County, which is at the base of the Northern Panhandle. I also got my formal education in West Virginia and now work in West Virginia. I work in the chemical industry. I work for a company called Solvay. which is a humongous worldwide company of about 30,000 people-ish. We have 150 manufacturing sites around the world on, nearly every corner of the world. But I work in Willow Island, West Virginia, which is not that far from Parkersburg, so Mid-Ohio Valley region of West Virginia. I went to West Liberty for undergraduate, and I went to West Virginia University for graduate school, both in chemistry. I specialized in inorganic chemistry at WVU, which I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but it just meant you're good at lots of things and not an expert at anything. So I was hired in 2006 at the Solvay plant that I still work at. So I've been there about 15 years. And you can see the career path at the bottom of the screen. It's reverse chronological order, I guess. But I was hired as an analytical chemist. That's really developing new methods, new technologies, using new technologies to do things better, faster, stronger, that kind of thing. I've also been a manager of a laboratory, and then kind of deviated into process chemistry after that. Spent a lot of time in the manufacturing facility, troubleshooting problems, equipment, capital expansions, that kind of thing. And I kind of migrated back to quality management. We do make a pharmaceutical at the plant I work at, so there's a big GMP aspect. I'm sure another one of our panelists are an expert in that. But pharma drives a lot of compliance. There's a lot of compliance needs in that industry. And I spent 2 years as what we call manufacturing excellence leader. That's a fancy term for a group of people that go in and try to fix systems that need help being fixed, as in processes that don't work, business processes that don't work. And they find people from diverse backgrounds to have, a different viewpoint on things. So that was a great 2 years. And I'm currently back as the quality manager at our Willow Island site. I did spend a small stint for our company in Canada at one of their sites for about a year, filling a gap. So, a STEM degree can really take you in a lot of paths. It can lead to a lot of travel if that's your thing. I'm sure some of our panelists travel quite a bit, but I've been to various places in the world trying to help different plants, different customers. It's very rewarding. But I have formerly lived here my whole life. Pictures you see here, pre-COVID, we do reach out. It's typically on the high school level to go and, give presentations on what you can do with STEM degrees. Because, at high school age, even at college age, I'm sure everyone's not aware of the diverse backgrounds or diverse careers that you have an opportunity to get to. And the picture on the bottom, we do something every year called Citizens Day, where we take a group from our plant. It's a company initiative, so every plant in the world does this and goes and does something for the community that's bigger than donating money or something like that, something bigger. We went and helped clean up and kind of polish off a new playground as a group. So that's some of the things our company does. We can get into what we actually do as companies during the general session. But with that, that's my background. And that's actually the end of the slides that we have. So I'll stop sharing. And we can turn it over. We're still in a large group here. For the students on the call or the other, panelists have questions, or other panelists or a couple of hosts. Are there any questions out there, general questions that you'd like an industry opinion on, whether it's on college experience, the migration from college to professional? What questions do you have? Why have you called into this?
Hi,
Erica, sorry. And Erica, you can go on to the chat questions if there are any as well. Let's wait for our first question here, though. I think that was going to be Katerina. Does I have that right?
Hi. Yes. Good evening, Mr. Thomas. Yeah, I just had a generalized question for all of the panelists, kind of where you all can choose who wants to answer or so forth. But my question is, it's kind of a two-part question. One part question is, I'm noticing a lot of panelists have, or at least I should correct, I noticed at least one panelist has only an undergrad degree. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful manner. I just mean how do we navigate, I guess, deciding what advice would you give navigating, deciding whether an undergrad degree is enough for the particular field that we want to go to, or do we feel the need to pursue a master's degree for a STEM career, or is that very more field specific? And then from that, also a second kind of question I had was, as students, I noticed, and from the slides, it feels like a lot of several of you have been at the same company for a while, and I know that we are kind of being taught that instead of being at a company where companies are no longer allowing us to kind of come in at one level and work our way up. It's more kind of what is your experience or what are your degrees and how can you serve us? And you kind of build a skill set and you offer that skill set to various companies instead of like that I've been at this company for kind of 10 years to, you know, or more kind of mentality. Does that make sense? I apologize. My question's a little all over the place.
No, that's a very fair question. So you've brought us to our first crossroads of this, and which panelist is going to answer your question in the general group? Now,
I'll do it since I'm the one who doesn't have.
About it, but I'd like to defer to somebody else.
I'll do it since I'm one of the ones who does not have an advanced degree. So I think it's fairly industry specific and kind of what major you ultimately end up choosing and what route you choose to go. I remember having that discussion with some of my professors when I was getting into my junior and senior year, trying to figure out what did the next 3 or 4 years of my life look like. Because I was in chemical engineering, it is a little different than some of the other engineerings that's out there. So if you're a civil engineer, if you're a mechanical engineer, there are a lot of times that you need to physically sign and approve like your drawing sets to say that, yes, this is structurally sound, yes, this is going to work, etc. And to get that, a lot of times they want either an advanced degree to kind of prove that you know what you're doing, or they want you to become a licensed professional engineer. In my areas of expertise, I didn't necessarily need that because of the role I was going to fill with the job offers that I had and kind of where I thought my life was going to lead. Didn't ultimately lead that way. I spent about 6 years in the nuclear industry before coming over to oil and gas. But it really does seem to depend on, you know, if you are somebody who is more research based, you know, if you really like being in a lab, if you like kind of doing that piece of it, it seems like you're geared more towards the advanced degree route because you get more of that hands-on lab experience, et cetera. And the second part of your question about kind of moving companies or staying with companies, et cetera, I think it depends on the company, number one. When I first started out of school, my internship wasn't hiring the first one. They didn't have any positions available. So then I found another company to intern at towards the end of my college time because I knew I wanted to see what else was out there. It led to a position there when I graduated. And one of the things that I was actually told, which I thought was interesting, my mentor at the time kind of said, every 2 years you should be looking for a new job, whether that's within your company or not within your company, because then you don't have to worry about getting fairly pigeonholed into, I can only do this, I'm only marketable in this area, I only have this one skill set. So that might be things like you go from an engineering role, in my case, up to a manager role, or that might be I go from designing pipelines and doing the more mechanical side to I now do more of the chemical coding side of things. With that also will come, so another reason I don't have any advanced degrees right now is that I have industry specific certifications as well that in what I do carry more weight than having a master's in chemical engineering would or a master's in chemistry would. So again, that's part of it too, but because I've changed jobs a couple times, I've only made a company switch once, but I've changed kind of what I do at the company is a couple different times. I've been able to gather all that skill set and gain those certifications so that if I do decide that I want to go somewhere else, or if I ever do get laid off, etc., I can take those with me to other locations, and it makes me marketable in that way as well. But I don't think there's any, if you find a company that you love, there's no harm in staying there for your whole career. I mean, if the company is treating you well and you're liking what you're doing and you do have those opportunities for advancement, there's nothing wrong with staying there for 30, 40 years, like our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation. It's just not always as easy to find those companies who are willing to work with you on certain things. So sorry, that was a really long answer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Any other panelists want to weigh in on the subject at hand?
One thing I will say, but I'll be brief, companies, especially large companies like DuPont and probably Solvay too, Craig, and you can say whether or not that's the case, or 3M, or, you know, a lot of the large companies used to have pensions, which was basically money that they contribute and you contribute into a retirement plan, but it was very specific to that company. And so if you left, then you left some money on the table, meaning your pension stopped building and you couldn't take it with you like you can today, a 401k. And most companies, including DuPont and Chemours, no longer offer a pension. And so there's much less incentive to stay with a company long term. I think that probably has some to do with it as well.
Along those lines too, Adam, this kind of goes back to the advanced degree question as well, in terms of there are a lot of companies nowadays that will pay for your advanced degree. Now it comes at a cost in terms of, you know, you then owe them X number of years of service after you've completed that degree. But that is another thing to consider too, where it might not make sense to go right away after you finish your undergrad and have somebody else pay for it if you're willing to, if you kind of want to do both, if you want to see what the workforce is like, but then also still get an advanced degree, that's usually an option too for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I'll add in that as well. We're finding increasing interest in companies of people that have a STEM degree, bachelor's, and then an MBA. To kind of polish that. You see a lot of those people being preferred in the management track of industry right now. So, you know, rule of thumb is typically bachelor's degree in any engineering discipline will get you a very rewarding career. More chemistry, biology stuff, typically those people, if you want to work in like a executive type job, maybe a master's degree or even a PhD if you want to do research. But if you're on the fence, a lot of companies are paying people to get MBAs right now because it makes better financial sense for them in the long run. But, you know, like Nikki said, sometimes you have to commit a certain number of months or years to that company if they're going to pay for it, or you have to pay it all back. That's very company specific.
I'm going to break in here and ask a related question from the chat, which is for graduate school, what do you think is the number one thing schools look for? And I think that might have been about a sciencey graduate school, but the MBA is interesting too.
Yeah. Again, I can talk all day about this. What about Cindy or Tia? We haven't heard from you yet. You have any opinion on this question?
This one's not my area of expertise because I'm the same. I just have an undergraduate. I can speak on from a talent acquisition perspective that having an undergraduate degree, you know, it, like Craig was referring to, you can still have a really successful career with having that. And then I do recommend on my side is taking advantage of the benefits the company has, because getting a graduate degree can be very expensive. And there are a lot of companies that will supplement that for you. Intuit, for example, offers tuition reimbursement. But in regards to what a school is looking for, I haven't applied. I found I know where my strengths are. And so that's why I stopped, but looking at other ways to get my education, but love to hear from someone who has applied for an advanced degree, or what helped them with making their decision, right, for the school they chose and what they did to apply.
I mean, I can speak to my experience personally. Is I went to WVU because basically they were willing to pay. They were willing to to waive the tuition and give you a stipend to live, in the town if you just agreed to help teach, TA laboratory type courses and do general tutoring. So, I consider myself a lucky one. I actually didn't pay a dime to go to graduate school. And there are a lot of schools out there that offer that for people that can help them with their needs, basically. These schools are huge, and you can only teach 20, 30 kids in a laboratory. So they need a fleet of graduate students to help out with these initiatives. So again, I'm not, maybe there's some very specialized school that look for public service, super high grades. Maybe there's some requirements there, but there are many, many schools in this country that will basically welcome you in the door and pay for it in certain disciplines.
It's a difficult question to answer. If there's a specific place that you're very much interested in and are worried that you might not get accepted, something that works oftentimes is if you, again, it's speaking for the science field, if there's a professor at this school that's doing research that you're very much interested in, you can reach out to that professor directly, even before you've applied, let alone a decision has been made on whether you should be accepted or not, and just talk about how interested you are in that program. And then that professor can either directly or at least send information to the board of folks that are going to be making that decision and basically put in a good word for you. So there are ways to help yourself if there's a specific place. In general, it's a packet, right? It's just like everything else. They'll look at your GPA, probably still your GRE, which is your graduate record exam. And as Craig said, it's a normal packet. I mean, so something that would elevate you for acceptance into undergrad would very much be applicable for acceptance into a graduate school.
So I have not finished a master's degree, but I've started one 3 different times at 3 different universities. And then life kind of took over from there. But in my experience, it seems like it was easier to get into grad school, if that's the route you want to go, than it was to get into undergrad. I mean, I know when I was in high school, it was the, make sure you have every activity under the sun that you're involved in, make sure you're in all the clubs, make sure your GPA is super high and that you're doing your volunteer work and that, you're a good church member and that you have a job and that, it seemed like there was a lot of pressure to kind of build, for lack of a better term, your like high school resume. Whereas it doesn't seem like that there was as much emphasis on all of the other stuff to get into the grad schools. Now, I'm sure if you are somebody who wants to go to like a Harvard or a Duke or a Cornell for grad school, that's a different situation than, some of the more state and local schools that I was looking at for grad school. I wasn't looking at the top Ivy League, most elite grad schools out there. So, I mean, take that with a grain of salt, but in my opinion, it didn't seem like there was nearly as much pressure to really have everything under the sun included in your documentation when you applied to a grad school too.
What about undergraduate research?
Yes. The question was, is undergraduate research valuable? And absolutely it is. Even if it's not for acceptance specifically or to build your packet, it very much is. Once you start, you already have a leg up when it comes time to start working in the lab. Again, thinking sciencey stuff. But yeah, absolutely. That's a big one, I would say. And most of the people that were accepted into the schools that I was accepted in, that I talked with, had done undergraduate research as well.
Hey, Adam, I'm going to hop in also on your undergraduate research and add that I feel that it adds value for you're adding to your work experience. So if you're applying for a job and, I'm sure people have felt this pressure and feel that it's difficult sometimes to get hired with a company when you are just coming out of school, whether it be with a bachelor's or with your PhD. And they're wanting that real world, real life experience. And that is where your research or your internship opportunities do come into play. And that adds to your resume and makes you very marketable. So I further support your comments and support anyone looking for those types of opportunities. I'm also going to add for the pharmaceutical industry, jumping back into the undergrad versus grad school with myself, as I just have a BS in chemistry. So in the pharmaceutical industry, if you are looking to do research and development, you're going to need an advanced degree. So you're definitely going to need master's, PhD level education. So if you're looking at the finished product side of things and just providing quality assistance, that is where a bachelor's degree would be applicable. So it just kind of depends on where you see yourself in the company, where you are most comfortable and what your goals are in life. Also, just looking at a work-life balance too when you look at those items. So just all things to consider in the long run.
That's part of why I transferred out of chemistry. I had a chemistry lab go horrible during one of my summer classes. And I realized that after having to redo the same lab 3 or 4 times, that being in a lab and being a research person based in a lab who would have to do almost the same thing every other day for 40 some years was not for me. That is not something I enjoyed. And I realized that because of the experience I got when I was going through my undergrad. So that's part of it too. I mean, you don't need to know all the answers today. As you get further into your education, you might start to figure out you really like the research side of it, and therefore you should probably focus more on the advanced degrees, or you like more of the hands-on application of the theories and principles you're learning, and so maybe something more engineering hands-on based might be a better fit for you, in which case you might not need that advanced degree too. So some of those, I think, are answers that you will find as you personally go through the process of your degree. But I knew that starting that third day, starting the titration lab for the 3rd time in the same day, that I wasn't doing this anymore. I couldn't do it for 40 hours a week for 40 years.
I second that wholeheartedly.
Related to that idea, there's a question in the chat about just sort of feeling a deflated interest in your major. And Josiah, I wondered if you are willing to unpack that a little bit more for us so that they're clearer about what you're asking. But it's a great question, and I think all of us have felt that.
Yes, I mean, I'm in mechanical engineering right now, and actually I started off as aerospace and, switched over to mechanical to kind of give me more broad career options. So I go to classes with some of my friends, and a lot of them are like really, really interested in just strictly cars, and I don't share that same interest. So it's kind of weird being in that study group sometimes, and they're sitting here talking about a twin turbine or all this jazz about cars, and I'm over here like, I love school, I want to study. So, it's just, it's okay. I mean, I feel, comfortable, just speaking with them and, interacting with them because they're good friends. But I also don't want to, feel like I feel left out because I don't share the same interests, even though we're in the same majors, or, they have, they're more hands-on people and I'm not so much. So I just wanted to kind of get some advice on how to navigate that.
So if you had told me I was going to say this when I was a senior in high school, I would have told you there's absolutely no way that these words would ever come out of my mouth. But being that I transferred into a whole new school, a whole new major halfway through a school year, I kind of was in the same boat in the, I didn't have friends that I made freshman year when everybody lived on the same floor as they were figuring out and adjusting to college. I didn't have a roommate. I lived in a single room in the dorm, so I didn't even have like a roommate to go to. So I looked more on the social side of things, which I joined an engineering sorority. So I am a member of Phi Sigma Rho, which is, at the time that I was in, and I think it's kind of changed now because of some of the more social issues and way it was for females in an engineering major. And so that helped me find people who had kind of the engineering mindset and engineering workload and engineering caseloads that we had, but could also help me. They might have been really good at physics. And so when I was going through a physical chemistry class, I had a group of people that I could kind of rely on and go to and get help from. But then I also was able to find friends who had common interests with me. And it was an engineering sorority that kind of brought us together, but we didn't always talk about engineering things. It was just a way for me to kind of make friends, meet some people that I had things in common with, but then also have a friendly face to wave to as I walk down the hallway in an engineering school. And I know that there are similar engineering fraternities, if that's something you'd be interested in. And also, even if it's not a true engineering fraternity, I know where I went, there is a lot of other sororities that weren't really the engineering sorority, but they had a lot of engineers that would gravitate towards them. So on the social side,
I think Nikki might be having some technical difficulties. Is anyone else catching that?
but okay,
Sorry.
I can hear you when you're all moving again.
You kind of froze up for about 20 seconds there.
Sorry. Looking more towards the social aspect and finding those things where they could support you and also have things in common were helpful to me. And a lot of times too, that meant a lot of my really good friends in college were from years ahead of me. So they were people who had gone through it before, and they weren't in my classes every day, but they were still things that they had things in common with me. And they were there to provide guidance if I needed as I navigated through kind of the fun of college and the stressors that come with college.
Yeah. And Josiah, I'll talk just 30 seconds here. My experience through school was I questioned myself the entire way, every step of the way. Was this right for me? Is this, because I was also around a lot of people that were super into the major we were in. And I always question myself, is this really what I want to do? But you got to keep the long game in mind. What do you want to be someday? And I will say, I don't associate cars with mechanical engineering at all. Personally, I think of completely other things, chemical equipment, large scale equipment. So I don't think you're doing yourself a disservice by continually looking in the mirror and saying, this is what I want to do. But I will go on record saying mechanical engineering and cars aren't a direct match and the only match.
Thank you.
Josiah, if I may bend your ear for a moment, my husband has a mechanical engineering degree, and he is a manager in a power plant. It's currently coal-fired, and this is also in the state of West Virginia. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that's you're working on big turbine engines. So that's the generation of the power. So it's just a different thing. If you've never thought of that, that is one career opportunity to use with your mechanical engineering degree.
One thing that I used to do something similar there was something called the Westinghouse Science Honors Institute. And people would come up to me and say, well, I want to be a nuclear engineer. And one of the things that the head of the nuclear engineering department for Pitt always said is, no, you don't. You know, doing something like a mechanical engineering degree, like a civil engineering degree, actually makes you more marketable, because you can you get such a broad experience and learn so many of the basics that can be applied across the board, that, you know, the world only needs a handful of nuclear engineers, because that is such a specialized thing. The world needs a boatload of mechanical engineers, a boatload of civil engineers, a boatload of chemical engineers, because they can do so many different things. And that kind of goes back to the question that Katarina asked about jumping jobs, where you might get out into the workforce and think that this is exactly what you wanted to do. But when you start to realize it, you start to get into it and realize, you know, I would much rather be working on trains, as with my mechanical engineering degree. I don't want to work in a power plant, or, you know, I want to work on heavy machinery on a construction site, as opposed to, you know, figuring out the torque values that need to go into this engine, something like that. I mean, your friends have seemed to found their niche where they want to do something with cars, and that's great for them, but that doesn't mean that that's the only thing you can do. And it doesn't mean that their mind might not change as they go through the rest of their schooling as well too. So something else to keep in mind is, you know, when you do have a much broader sort of education base for what you're learning, you can do a whole lot more and really find what you are interested in without having to constantly shift paths and pivot as much.
Thank you.
And there was a cool question too about, it was directed to you, Craig, about equipment. I just thought about your experience dealing with different kinds of equipment and wanted to know, what equipment have you mainly used as a chemist, and how much does it help to know these techniques to get into professional schools for undergraduate students?
Okay. So the plant I work at is predominantly batch chemistry. So you can vision a lab flask in a lab, but about 1 billion times bigger. So we handle vessels 12,000 gallons. That's, you know, it's huge. It's like a building. But, you know, the equipment we use, you know, is fairly simple. It's stainless steel reactors, agitators with, you know, engines on top. We make pastilles, which is like giant printer type thing. But what you'll find is all industrial equipment nearly looks the same. You've got big condensers, just like your small lab condensers. You've got piping everywhere, pumps everywhere. So those are the kind of equipment that I personally am used to dealing with. It's pumps, it's agitators, condensers, and then we also use industrial size centrifuges, which, you know, to everyday, you know, looking at it, looks like a giant washing machine. I mean, it looks like a top loading washing machine, except it's about 100 times bigger. We use vacuum dryers, and that you put powders, wet powders, into a dryer, and it literally tumbles 2 stories high while you pull vacuum on it and put heat on the steam jacket. You know, it's equipment like that we personally use. Adam, I'm assuming your plant is fairly similar.
Yep.
But it's motorized equipment, yes. You know, one thing we haven't talked much about in these as well is there's also support of that. You know, safety in industry is a huge thing. Usually companies have huge state safety departments that they may not be experts in the equipment, but they're experts in keeping people safe from that equipment with human error protecting, machine guarding, that kind of stuff. That's a whole career path that you never hear about in college. But that's the equipment. Sorry for the rambling answer, but that's the kind of equipment that I'm used to handling.
On the opposite side of that, so Craig and Adam work in large plants, you know, large industrial scale plants. In my line of work as a corrosion engineer and as a modeling engineer, I need analytical samples pulled from liquid that might be in a pipeline, gas that's in a pipeline, et cetera. And so while I don't personally do it, we do work with a small lab that does have a staff that runs things like a gas chromatograph. They have a scanning electron microscope to look at, you know, what's on the coupon that we've taken out of the pipe to see, what components might be in there causing it to corrode faster than it should, et cetera. So, I mean, if you want to go more analytical and stay kind of at the level of what you are using in your chemistry classes now, in your labs and things like that, that is another option that you can do with your chemistry degree. It's another support function too. And I work a lot with coatings as well. And so I've been to PPG labs, I've been to Sherwin-Williams labs, et cetera. And it's similar to where the lab chemist and the bench chemist is going to take all the formulations and see, is it going to work to begin with? Is this going to do what I need it to do and be able to be replicated at a level that would then get put into a giant plant that Craig or Adam would work at. And so that's another piece. If you don't want to be out there with giant, huge tanks and huge pumps and things like that, there is still a much smaller support piece that, helps the oil and gas industry, helps the paint industry, helps the chemical industry. I guarantee you that when a new drug comes to market, they're not throwing it into a giant scale plant and saying, let's hope it works. There's a lot of behind the scenes chemistry that's happening as well, and science that's happening as well, to make sure that it's a viable option for the company before it goes through. So, I don't know, I'm only speaking up because if I heard like tanks and pumps, I would have been like, I don't want to do that. But if I could hear like I would get to play with my gas chromatographs all day, I'd be a little more likely to say like, maybe that would be okay. But not a chemist, was terrible at chemistry, but just something to consider too, where there's, again, it goes back to the fluidity of things and how one degree can apply so many other places, so far across the board, where you can go and work in a giant plant and work in a cracker plant or work on the, or you can take your degree and do something almost on the opposite end of the spectrum that is much smaller and much more focused on a small scale equipment, and the like high tech microscopes and pictures and things like that. None of which I understand, but I know they have them and I know it works.
Yeah, I'll jump into, in college, one of the best things you can do for yourself is learn GC and HPLC if you plan to do a laboratory type job. Those are the two predominant chromatography technologies that you'll see in almost every industrial or research setting.
Even if you're not going to go into chemistry or be a chemist, it's good to know those skills too, because then it's easy. If you understand what's happening, it's very easy to take the results and data that someone is giving to you and say, does this make sense? Or is this an issue? Do these numbers, are these the numbers I'm expecting to see, yes or no? And if you understand how those numbers were generated because you've used a gas chromatograph or things like that, you use chromatography, it helps you be a better asset to your company, because then you're not just blindly taking the results too. So even if you're not going to want to go into chemistry, still pay attention in your chemistry lab.
Right. So how are we doing on questions, Eric? I just see we're coming on the 7 o'clock mark, and I want to make sure we have time for breakout rooms. If that's something, I see some of our crowd is gone away a little bit. Do we want to do the breakout rooms? Or are there a lot of other questions in the chat box waiting?
No, Beth has a question though.
Okay.
I think we've covered the chat questions, but I would just like to ask Tia about her internship opportunities with Intuit, because I think some of the students here might be excited to hear about how those internships would work.
Awesome. So the Intuit internships, and I don't know if everyone's familiar with Intuit. So Intuit is the makers of QuickBooks and TurboTax. And so we have a ton of positions beginning to open this fall. So typically our internship process is that we do interviews and assessments in the September through November timeframe. And so folks can apply. You can take a look at careers.intuit.com or any of the apps folks may use for finding internships. And so with our assessment process, there typically is there's a phone screen. So you'll answer some questions with a recruiter or a sourcer just to ensure that you're, a great add to the company. And then also there's like a technical assessment. So if you're going like the software engineer route, or, there may be like a coding exercise that you'll have to do where they're assessing your abilities within that aspect. And so if you're successful in that portion of the interview process, you then go through what we call assessing for awesome. And that's where we have two of our assessors who will ask some technical questions regarding what your capabilities are, but then also things that are tied to our company values, which are really important to us. And so those are things like integrity without compromise, stronger together, and courage and customer obsession. And so once that process is done and you are able to complete that round of interviews and you're successful, then you are given an offer. And if you choose to accept it, the internships typically last through the summer. Sometimes they are extended. They're fully paid internships. We are opening back up in January where folks can go back on site. But right now we're 100% virtual. Eventually we'll be going to a hybrid model where folks can work 2 to 3 days in the office. But I think the list just came out. We're one of the top internships in the country, and we pay very well from what I hear, one of the best paid ones. But then also we have a lot of great networking opportunities where our employee resource groups connect with our interns as well. So it's an opportunity for you to connect with someone that's within your same community and understand what their experience is like at Intuit. We have a lot of fun activities. I know one thing they did was like an internship talent show. So if in addition to your craft, you may be a singer or do something you'd like to present, but we like to keep it fun. And these are things that we do once you're hired full-time as well. My first day at Intuit was Halloween 2005, so many moons ago, but everyone was dressed up in costumes. I was like, I need to stay here. Like, these are my people. So yes, it's fantastic. But we love having folks go through our internship process. Typically, you do need to be a junior or a senior, but keep your eyes open. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I could definitely connect you with one of our university recruiters. And I'll put my link in the chat here soon, but glad to answer any questions folks may have as they're preparing to apply for internships. I see one where internships located. So all over the globe, we have internships available. But we have various sites in California. There's Mountain View in San Diego. I happen to be in Texas. So there's Plano, Texas. We have a Virginia location. That's where I started, was Fredericksburg, Virginia. So we have a site there. So take a look at our website. There's lots of opportunities across the US.
So, we're getting to the closing hour here. Now that you've gone to breakout rooms, for the people that are left, do you have any other questions you want to ask the group?
Yeah, I have a question. So, so for my club at the FERT2, like, I love events like this because meeting with industry professional and being able to ask questions. For my club, I am wanting to do something similar to this. We are wanting to do it in person, maybe, because of COVID. But do you have any tip on how I can reach out to like industry professional about visiting, or maybe setting up a Zoom for my club, like kind of like this?
This is exactly how. Networking is, in my experience, the easiest and most effective way to do it. So take down one of our email addresses. and send somebody a note and say, hey, what's up? And if we can't do it, then we'll find somebody that could do it in person.
Thank you.
I have a question that unfortunately Nikki, I believe I'm getting names all over the place. Didn't get the chance to completely finish answering. But at the same time, as she finishes maybe answering that question real quick, I was also wanting to ask that question of Tia, but also of you gentlemen, and kind of your thoughts on that. Some advice to women in STEM. When I was a little girl, definitely there was, a push of like, yes, you can do it. But there were so many times where it was just a very male dominated field. And there were a lot of men in that field, and some were more supportive and some weren't as supportive. And then there's also, even among that, when I find women in STEM, sometimes some females are more supportive, some are more competitive. So just any advice as a female in STEM, and a little background on myself, I'm looking to go to medical school. So, but I'm also trying to explore some options that are available beyond that, if I find that medical school is not where I want to go. So if that makes sense.
So I'll finish where I left off. What I had told Katarina is, if somebody wants to put you down, they're going to find a way to put you down. You're either going to be too young, you're not going to have enough experience. It's going to be because you're female. It's going to be because you're Black. It's going to be because, English isn't your first language, whatever it is. If somebody wants to think less of you as an individual, they're going to find a reason to do so. And you just need to continue to power through that, which isn't always easy. I get that too. And you do have to have a bit of a thick skin to be a female in this industry, in my opinion, because a lot of times you are the only female in a meeting, in the room. You are the one who has to speak up. You are the one who has to convince all of your male management counterparts why this is the good idea. When you're just that little girl. Now, my management has been very good at my company that they don't treat me like that. I have worked other places where things like that have kind of been how you are handled. And I know from other people in the industry, other females in the industry where they work, they've had to deal with some of that too. It's a lot of, you have to have a lot of confidence in yourself to be able to power through and just know that what you're doing is what you want to be doing. You like it. There's no reason you can't be doing it. And if you're standing up because something isn't safe, something isn't ethical, whatever, you need to understand that it wouldn't matter who you were. If you're coming up and kind of going against the grain, they're not going to like what you have to say anyway, because you are not just going with the flow. You are trying to make a change, fix something. You're not just kind of putting blinders on. You're actually speaking up and saying something. So I do think it's gotten a lot better. I know I've been on job interviews when I first got out of college, and some of the things that were said to me, I honestly could not believe came out of a manager's mouth. I think the industry has changed a lot in that regard. And I think people are becoming much more aware. And I think there's been a lot of wonderful females who have paved the way to make it easier for us. And there will be those ones who will look at you and say, I got here on my own, figure it out. But I do think, again, as more women are coming into kind of the STEM role, I think you're seeing less and less of that, because I think a lot of the women who are where they are now are there because somebody else helped them get there. They weren't necessarily forging the same path that they had to, back in the 40s and 50s, et cetera. I have been lucky that I have never been told that. Everyone's always been very willing and gracious. But a lot of it comes down to you too. You need to put the work in, and you need to show the respect to earn the respect. You're not just going to hand it to you.
Yeah, and I'll chime in briefly too. Use those as motivation, right? I've been hired a few times for a few different jobs, and I'll go on record saying I was never the first choice for whatever opening that was. And I think that always drove me to try to prove to the people that made those choices that they were wrong, right? I don't want to be negative or anything, but you see certain setbacks, certain biases, be the disruptor, use it to your advantage.
I think today, on a positive note, my company in particular, I know something that we are doing by 2030, we've made a corporate pledge that our workforce will be a direct, will exactly match the population of where the site is. So in other words, 51% women in Wood County, West Virginia. Well, 51% of the employees at the Chemours site in Parkersburg will be women. And so they're making a very concerted effort to do that. And so things are very different, I think, now today. And I think you're at the perfect place, honestly, just to keep kind of pushing that momentum. With today's world is so much different. And I'm proud to be part of a company that has made that declaration. So just wanted to add that.
So I would just add too, a lot of companies are looking to improve their diversity, right? They have goals that are out there. At Intuit, we have 2 affinity groups. So we have Tech Women at Intuit, TWI, and then we also have the Women's Network. So there's a lot of great resources available once you come in at a company in order to build your network and get support and be in communities that are like you, so you are supported. I agree with what Nikki said when it comes to having confidence within yourself. I know the first part of my career, I spent a lot of time second guessing myself and what they call imposter syndrome. So do I deserve to be in the space where I am? And once I was able to look at myself and, you know what, you do great things. You are amazing. And other people need to see that as well. That's when I was able to flip the script and then also advocate for myself. The person that's going to advocate for you best is you. But then also you need to, in addition to that, build your own board of directors, right? Your personal board of directors, folks that can help you with your career, provide you advice, hold you accountable, but also looking for people to be your sponsor. So that is a person that when you are not in the room or you can't speak for yourself, they can speak for you. And so though having those things will help you in your career. Just remember to stay true to who you are, and you don't have to change who you are in order to be successful. You can do it.
The other thing I would say too is ask for feedback if you need it. If you are truly doubting yourself, if you are worried that maybe you're not living up to the expectations, etc., ask whoever it is that you report to, ask your coworkers, etc., because that is one thing that corporate America still isn't great at, in my opinion, is you have your review cycles when you hit the real world and you find out during your review cycles how you're doing. But it's very rare, at least from what I've experienced, for someone to come out and say, hey, you did a really great job. Or like, hey, you're not doing such a great job. Like, you better buck up. Just because that there doesn't seem to be the continuous feedback loop that you're used to getting, in high school and in college, where you're seeing all of your exams and your assignments and things like that. So if you do start to find that your confidence is dwindling a little bit, or you are a little concerned with, am I doing okay? Is this the right thing for me? Am I making the right choices? You have to kind of reach out to ask for that reinforcement sometimes. And don't be afraid to do that. You might not like the answer, but at least you then have an answer and you know what to work on.
Yeah, try to be specific when you're asking as well, because I think as humans, we're kind of concerned of giving feedback, and feedback can be pretty fluffy in what people say. Well, Tia speaks well, or Nikki, did nice on that project, right? That you want things that you can actually work on and providing constructive feedback. So, if there's a certain area you don't feel comfortable in, ask, how can you do better? How can I be even better than what I am today. And it should help you be able to improve.
Good.
Thank you all so very much. I really appreciate everyone's input on my questions. Thank you so much.
Well, with that being said, we would like to thank the students for joining today. Thank our coach, our co-panelists, I guess I'll say. On behalf of the First Two Network, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Erica, for helping us behind the scenes. It's been a pleasure. And we've made it to the weekend, everybody. Enjoy yourself. Until next time.